Thank you.
It's right now. It's very hot.
Yeah.
Okay, we're live. Welcome to Senate Economic Development on February 9th. Are we on the 9th?
Yes.
We have our great legislative counsel, Mr. Ellen. And we're still in markup and questions. I hope people don't mind if I open my computer, I have, well, I can do it on my phone. I have the notes that I have on each section. And we made it to section 5. It's not right. Because section 4 was similarly the definitions. And unless, Ellen, you want us to recap anything where we landed in a new place, or we're gonna work on that tomorrow and try to have 7.1 next week. Yeah,
So we're on
we're on section
page,
5.
we're on page 6.
Okay, oh yeah, I'll find a copy of the bill file.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're looking at draft 6.1 dated 1/27, 2023. So I think we did start talking about section 5 yesterday.
Yes.
So section 5 is the section that directs planning commissions to provide information to the Department of Housing and Community Development after they've made bylaw amendments or adoptions. Currently, there already are provisions in statute that require that, but this section, starting at the bottom of page 7, adds additional elements that they need to submit to the department as part of their report. And so we did start talking about this a little bit. Senator Harrison had one sort of thought.
Right,
Yeah,
right. I was hoping to make it easier for municipalities and have a higher confidence in the data. And I thought it would be better for the state to actually input this information.
and we now have some of our like expert witnesses lining the room on that kind of topic. I think we started to discuss like informally, is that what's gonna happen anyway? But we haven't had, I don't know that we've had in the witness chair the person who would be in charge of making sure this data is input. And if that person is here, you know, we can tap them in from the sideline to introduce themselves and share if this seems like it's gonna be possible, if you understand what Senator Harrison's asking.
Chris Cochran from the Department of Housing and Community Development. This is existing, we already have this existing framework. Municipalities are required to update and send this data to the department. This is just a change based on the presentation we saw at the housing conference, to collect a little bit more detailed information on zoning districts through maps. This process right now is, we work closely with the regional planning commissions, and they're likely going to be the entities that enters a lot of this data. You should talk with them to make sure that they're comfortable continuing this work. But they do want to build out the zoning, map of atlas of the state.
Right.
And I think it's a more appropriate role for them. Like, you should absolutely give them.
So we would change, would we change something in the language that references the regional planning?
I don't think you even need to
Okay.
reference them. They're going to
Okay.
just assist. They have an annual contract with us to help
Okay.
municipalities
Okay,
to, fill any gaps or
Yeah.
expertise that they need.
Do the changes that we're potentially making, require any additional data?
Yeah, they're going to have to do a GIS map of their zoning districts.
So
All the
GIS map might
expertise is
be-
with the RPCs. They all have mapping.
they do, yeah, I mean,
I just don't think we should assume. I think we
Well,
should
Peter Gregory,
is
verify.
Peter
Peter Gregory's
yeah,
here.
Peter Gregory.
I can text him.
Okay, yeah.
Can I just add that I think the language is close, but perhaps for Senator Harrison's concern, it's very vague on the top of page 8. And so so currently what it just reads is that the planning commission shall prepare a report that, and then like line 1 confirms that the complete bylaws have been uploaded. So it doesn't say there who has uploaded. So it says confirms that the bylaws have been updated.
Is it an
So-
existing statute that they need to?
No, so this
Okay.
is new on the top of page 8.
Right, I just didn't know if it references something else where they're supposed to do an annual update.
I don't think, I think that this specific, so the report itself is already in existence. We're requiring different data, some additional data in this language. And so I think maybe there's some vagueness in here that would potentially allow for the RPC or someone, a technical assistant to actually do the uploading, but I think that it reads, it's asking the planning commission to put in writing that we have sent the data to be uploaded.
To me, it says that the planning commission is having to confirm that it has been uploaded. So they have the responsibility to make sure it's been uploaded. And that, they may not have that responsibility now. And if they don't, that could be a big deal. I've just had to upload things to state systems and it's been horrendous and really difficult. But when you ever have changes to staff, you can't even get into the system.
Okay,
So I wanted to make sure we're not putting that sort of burden on them.
I don't know if someone actually went to go find Peter Gregory or what happened.
I know where he is. You want me, but
Well, I'm just saying, I think that this could be solved by making the language a little more clear. I'm not,
Okay.
and maybe you want to hear from the RBCs, but I'm not, my interpretation of what you just discussed is that we just need to, I think the language already allows for what was just discussed, because the word confirm is different than uploaded. Like, it doesn't say the planning commission uploaded the data.
I understand.
Yeah. So I think.
But there's
that's
just a
close.
few assumptions that we're making.
Right,
And
yes.
And it does actually make the planning commission liable if someone else uploads it improperly or doesn't upload it at all.
So it sounds like, I mean, what I'm hearing, why I want to find the regional planning commissions is because they might be that technical, have a contract to be the technical assistance entity to make sure it's uploaded properly and
Yeah.
not leave it to the planning commissions. And that's unstated here, but seems to be an understanding, and does it need to be explicit is what you're asking. And I think Senator Harrison, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but number 3 was demonstrating conformity with sections, the sections of the bill on what could be discriminatory zoning or not meet the intent. And the RPCs have been saying for a long time, they want to be more engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I mean, this is a great moment for them to be named as like the entity that's going to help make sure that there's no, that there's no exclusionary zoning happening that on their watch kind of thing.
Sure, my concern with that though, for number 3, is that this will have happened after the town has done their work.
So there's no,
And so this is making sure the town
right.
is on notice that they're going to need to address these criteria. And so the RPC will have some input on that,
Right.
but
It could be like the last quality control, like we're uploading this for you, but we're flagging that this should probably be, this could constitute exclusionary zoning.
right, at that stage though, will they be able to do anything about it if the bylaws have already been adopted?
That's why I want Peter.
Okay.
Because I don't know how the next part would work, but yeah, I think I may have heard you say that, Senator Harrison. I have a note about is this exclusionary zoning?
Right, and I think that would logically happen at a different point in the process.
Yeah.
But just this is an additional responsibility of the towns that refers to specific IT systems of the state. And I know that it can be very difficult and challenging to access some of these systems. And I don't think it's fair to put the burden on the municipality rather than on the state.
Did you like the idea of explicitly naming the regional planning commissions over?
I would prefer the state. I would prefer that the municipalities be encouraged to upload this information, but then if they're not able to, that they're able to transmit the information in whatever way they can, and then the state uploads it. That would be my suggestion. But we can talk with our
Chris,
RPC.
if you,
I mean, it's ultimately your decision. We just don't have the staff to do that right now, and we do have a contract with the regional planning commissions to provide technical assistance and services to municipalities. So if you want to go that way, we have to have a conversation about it.
That's
State
fine.
staff.
And this is a conversation about municipal staffing. And maybe the municipalities would be fine with it, but I don't know that. We can also talk to,
Well, now we have a lot of informal conversations going with the planners around the state, you know, we could reach out to them and see, I mean, no one
Right.
has raised that this is a burden and many planners have come in.
right,
Planning commission
because
members.
folks with planners,
Yeah,
the planners are used to this kind of situation, but
Mhm.
there are, most municipalities, I would say, probably don't have planners.
yeah.
I would say that, and usually your only full-time staff is your town clerk, who may or may not be computer literate.
Mhm.
So,
So Carol Dawes is usually who we talk to, we want the clerks to weigh in on something. We probably don't have time for more tests, but then Carol is very good at, like, if you email her and say, is this language of concern to you?
Sure, I can reach out to folks.
Okay,
we're
Carol
actually trying to get Carol in for,
in finance, yeah.
for the salary.
We do often ask Carol, like, by the way, please, but, Scott,
But again, Barry is a big city.
Carol Dawes, who's head the clerk association, to see if this leaves anyone out, and we can move on, but if Peter Gregory shows up, we can return to this as well, yeah,
He's testifying,
okay,
but he's aware of this issue and will come down.
great, okay. Does that work for now?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
To Chris. Chris, what's the penalty for not following every element of this requirement?
At this point, it's voluntary. There's no accountability mechanism. However, there's a later section in the bill that says if you don't follow these rules, the AG or Human Rights Commission can.
Oh, the Human Rights Commission section, okay.
So the Human Rights Commission might be the arbiter if there's exclusionary zoning or unfair housing practices occurring. Or a town isn't complying, to help us understand what's going on.
Right, it was more the administrative process. So you say this is voluntary, but there's a shall there.
You can pass a law, people aren't always gonna follow the law. We collect all this information. If they don't submit this information, their bylaws can be defective essentially, so there are some consequences to the municipality. But like I said, we don't have a police force to go out and enforce, you've updated your bylaws, whereas it's on their database.
Town clerks run their own little fiefdoms. And
And we
that's it.
do have 500,000 for municipal bylaw updates. We do have a request too from the rural caucus to make that $1 million because municipal bylaws will become more critical for resources and support like this and requests that we're making than before.
Oh, understand, I guess, and just to say it maybe more clearly, there are two separate databases that are referenced that municipalities shall upload information to. That's my concern.
Oh, okay. That
That
wasn't clear to me.
doesn't seem,
So there's the municipal, in this section, the municipal plan and bylaw database.
yeah, there's the Vermont Open Geo Data Portal. I don't know what it's like to access that. And then there's the municipal plan and bylaw database.
That's fair.
So which actually I think should say something like or successor, because that thing may change,
Yeah,
Both currently exist.
right? But we're not writing this just for today, we're writing this for the future. So sometimes it's nice to put in language that provides for other names.
it's easier than rewriting a law.
But I just, it's a burden, and I don't know how much of a burden it could be to municipalities.
Right.
Maybe it's not a big deal, but I would just like to check with them before we make
Yeah.
it
Okay.
obligatory.
If it's too difficult, they won't do it. And what we really want them to do is update their bylaws and,
Right.
why give an excuse not to?
Right. So
So we'll just hear from folks.
I was gonna say, RPCs, the Planners Association and the Clerks Association together should be able to help us answer if there's issues with this section.
Yes, and clarify responsibility.
Mhm. But yeah, thanks for flagging there's two places they need to upload. I thought one was like the portal through which you upload it to the database. But clearly.
I don't know. It's just some of the systems are horrendous.
Right. And I think maybe the portal, or I don't want to speak for Senator Clarkson, but she had wanted a zoning atlas.
Oh,
Because,
we all want.
yes, right. So it's like, there was this request that we have as much good data as we can. And then
I
there's money
completely
to
agree
help
with that.
people. Yeah. Okay. Senator Clarkson, is there anything else you want to say about the section on
On bylaws,
zoning data and bylaws and the
I apologize. I had,
prospective development of a statewide zoning atlas?
I am very supportive of the statewide zoning atlas. I think it's going to be very helpful and illuminating for the state to see how we're actually zoned and why this is such an important thing for us to address.
Who staffs the municipal planning data center? Okay, so but that is contracted out, there's no staffing capacity of that, or?
It's our administrative staff receive the bylaws, upload them. It is just a database of all municipal bylaws.
So it's a center
Okay,
that has a
it's a
purpose,
virtual
but
center.
It's a website where you can search all the municipalities' bylaws.
Okay,
and so
Or warehouse, clearinghouse, whatever.
a virtual center?
man,
Yes, yeah.
did you text Peter? I sadly,
He's typing.
Yeah.
okay, because he's here. I just know that he's here.
Mhm. Oh, Senator Brown.
Is there any functionality that allows you to do more than simply look at an individual municipality's bylaws?
It's a searchable database, so.
I know that can you accumulate information? Can you search for groups of information? Which towns have bylaws that do A, B, C, and D? Or can you, is there anything useful?
I hope so.
Oh, that.
We inherited this statute that said, that for years and years, this was submitted to a library essentially. That paper process didn't seem very useful in this day and age. Several years ago, we created a process to upload this to make it a digital process. The bylaws are searchable, but you can't query the database. There's no tags or indicators.
Basically, it's a paper database that is
It's
now
Yeah.
in electronic form.
Right, but it's useful to people because they're always looking for ideas for what did this municipality do for this kind of, how do
But
they?
to find it, you've got to go municipality by municipality. It's not smart data.
It's not a smart database.
But it's a repository. It's where everything's dumped. And the challenge we need is somebody to take it and make something of it
And that's.
and interpret it.
That's the intent, the next step we want to take with this.
Right now, it's a dumpster.
It is a very
Well,
tidy dumpster.
It's a tidy but the intent is to actually take all this information that's there and make some useful sense of it.
And that's the additional analysis
The next
that's needed to make it useful. So we are where we are. We'd like to take it to the next step.
Is there a plan to do that?
In this statute,
That's what this
That's
is
what
about.
this is solely.
And can you remind me, because I don't see it in section 5, what the money is that we're appropriating for this
there's no money appropriated for it.
and why? I mean, it's gonna cost some time and effort to do this.
There was a conversation with Maura Collins, John Adams from BCGI,
Right.
myself, and the RPCs about privately fundraising.
Oh, right, that's right.
Okay, Scott is wonderful and has maybe pulled up the website, because that was gonna be my next.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think, we should see what our towns have to look at in this.
And where they're
unique
putting their-
dumpster.
Where they're putting stuff.
So are the towns
JFI
uploading
one.
it now?
Yes.
All of the towns?
So everybody with bylaws
You need-
are required to do this.
So
Kind of class.
not everybody has bylaws.
20% of communities. do not.
Do the, I don't know.
These are after class.
Is there something you want to direct us to, Senator?
Just go back. You
Yeah.
mentioned this section, is it section 5 that you're referring to?
Yes.
And that it creates, that it effectively allows you to create something that gives you in effect, a tool so that you can search more actively and more intelligently than you're doing now. Is that?
We don't need a law to do a better job.
Yeah, right.
We
No,
just
I
lack the
understand.
resources usually to make.
But generally, to create something that is useful for the kinds of things that we're talking about, presumably there's a cost associated with it and some technology or technology work that the individual department probably does not have. And I'm just wondering, I'm reading through this and I'm just trying to say, where does it say what you're going to do with this?
It's not expressly spelled out. Again, we're taking what we do already. We're asking for the municipality to do a little additional analysis
To make it more useful.
and provide us actually, geospatial maps of their zoning districts so we can create this statewide map. So it is not, this is an incremental change. It is not, but it's a change where there's a mechanism in this that we'll be able to build and create transparency in a process that's not very transparent.
Right. Well, and not as useful as it could be. And I applaud your willingness of this group to take on some of the initial costs. And maybe what we could ask for is a report back, just an update that we would have so that we could, because I think Randy and I mean, at least I'm concerned that you have the resources to actually make this as useful as possible. So maybe a report back, at least initially, so that we have a notion of your progress, how much more useful it is, and if we can do anything to make it more useful to everybody, so that everyone can access it and make it more useful.
I think we can get that next
Yeah,
year
we
without
can just
like a
ask.
formal anything. And I just want to make sure people note on the top of page 7, line 3, this was a form that basically everyone had to fill out that was struck. And now it's become like, so before it sounded like it was some kind of paper that everyone used.
Right, and now it's uploaded, I think.
So it will still be, so it's still farther down on line 16
Mhm.
and 17. The department is still going to create a form.
Got it.
And form and content, but this is where they would put it now.
And it could be a digital form. It's not necessarily assumed it's a paper
Yeah.
form. It's a digital form.
Okay. Wendy, Senator Harrison, is there anything you wanted to show us on this website?
I don't know, I haven't been to, but the, maybe give us an example of the geographic information that municipalities will now need to provide that they don't need to provide
That
now.
they currently have that they can.
It's a shapefile. You can go to the Mount
Is it
Planning
the-
Atlas and it'll be housed there.
Okay,
RPCs help all municipalities create these shapefiles for designation programs. This is not, everybody's fairly comfortable with this technology.
Everyone's
Small
already
towns
doing it.
Can do it. The
Well-
smallest villages
Okay.
get RPC's assistance to do this.
all right, we're just assuming that, so I just don't think it's
Yeah,
right
absolutely. You
to
want to
assume
check?
that.
You want to check?
I think we
Yeah.
can get it confirmed by the RPCs.
Right.
Yes, that's the plan, we were talking about that one.
Yeah,
Scott
so
has
I apologize.
shown us the map, the current zoning atlas or whatever this is.
No, it's great to have.
Do you want to like zoom in
Yeah.
on
And there's,
Brandon
you know,
County or?
There's different layers that can tell you different things. You see along the left-hand side there, there's different themes, transportation, community development. So just depending on what information you'd like to see, it's all layered there.
It's just not complete necessarily as
And-
fulsome as it could be.
And we do have zoning district boundaries up there. They're static. There needs to be a mechanism to keep them updated and current. And they're not very meaningful because what one community identifies as an R1 residential area is different from another community. So that we need an additional level of interpretation to be able to make it meaningful, to be able to roll up all this and for you to look statewide and be able to compare town X to town Y.
And have it consistent across towns and communities and, right.
Which is actually, I would argue that's a reason for the state to do some of the input, so that you can make sure that it's accurate before it's put out there.
There's a whole methodology and process around that.
And this is standardized across the RPCs, how they assist.
We would have to work with them on what the process would
Okay.
be, absolutely,
Okay.
but yeah.
And there's a planning bill somewhere floating out there for this reason, right? There's like H5.
That is really, yeah, there's a mapping component to that for future land use mapping. So I think all this work around what do our what do our land use rules look like on the land?
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be really important to a lot of other conversations.
I think we've suffered from not having a planning office for 25 years.
All right, yes, this is your specialty, yes.
This is what.
That, you have
moves
been
me.
consistent on that.
But yes, I think we might get more information with the RPCs, but that they have a contract and that there is that, like,
Understand?
And each of their offices has this ability, even if some of our smaller towns don't.
Right, and no, and the GIS folks are great, but just generally with databases, it's
Mhm.
really good to control the data as it's put in, so that you make sure you have the same parameters, you're using the same terms. And that's where it would, to me, it would make sense to have the state, since the state is the owner of this, and the
Right.
state is the only one who has access to everything, be the uploader.
Mhm.
But we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah,
so-
yeah. No, I remember, because our former colleague Sam Young from the House traveled to every town to do their ADA compliance updates.
Hmm.
And the state contracted with him to physically go to every town as clerk and do this work. So, I think the state takes seriously when something needs to happen and tries to offer technical assistance so that we can check with RBCs. Okay.
Great, I applaud this, and I think for us to, as we continue this work, this is gonna be essential. We need
Oh,
better
totally.
data and I think this is terrific.
What work that we want to do? Section 6, and Scott, you're able to. Those three links. Planners, clerks, RPCs. Make sure that they all of their heads have input on this. All the heavy groups.
And may I just say that
Yeah.
if we could get Peter to pop his head in before noon
I
to
think
confirm
Chris is
that,
okay.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Would you do that direct ask?
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna have to leave early because joint fiscal is having a formative meeting and I need to nominate the chair.
Okay. I
Oh.
personally, whenever you get up and leave, I assume it's for a good reason. So
I would hope you would do that for all of us.
Well, I do, but I know generally the bucket of reasons, so Senator Cummings gonna say, I don't always know your bucket of reasons.
This one's unusual, it's blowing my agenda planning, but,
Okay, section 6, page 8.
So section 6 is striking the ability for any 10 persons who are voters or real property owners in a municipality to appeal a decision, a zoning decision by the administrative officer of the town.
So many people are left who can appeal. I think we've heard a lot about how appeals can be weaponized and a real killer. And we've heard a few objections, but not many, and I really like.
does zoning officer include the planning commission? Or is, when the planning commission approves something, is it actually the zoning administrator who puts the stamp on it?
No, so I'm pretty sure this is specific just to permits, not for bylaw adoption.
No, it's not bylaw adoption.
Okay.
It's if the planning commission approves a project
Oh, okay.
and, it's the commission that approves it. Can 3 or 4 people from that live a mile away from that project just get together and appeal that decision?
So currently it's not 3, currently in statute, 10 people from the town can. And so it's eliminating that provision, that any 10 people.
Right,
Yeah.
that I like. It says the administrating officer, and I just want to make sure that that's a decision of the planning commission is included in that.
I believe, so every town calls it, well, many towns call it something different. So in statute, it's the appropriate municipal panel, whichever panel that is.
Is,
And so I
yes.
think that is covered. I can double check, but this
That's
is
right, it isn't.
specific to permit
Yeah,
decisions.
It's
basically.
design, what do we have now?
I think it's
We
the
got it.
DRB, the
Yeah,
Development Review Board.
It could
Yes.
be DRB, it could
That's
be
right,
Board
it
of
used to be
Adjustment.
planning and then
Yeah.
there was,
So,
there were 2 and now there's 1.
I will double check to make sure. But this is for the first issuance of the permit. An appeal can be filed by one of the interested parties.
And abutters.
Yes, so I can read you
Butters,
the.
butters
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it would be helpful if you read who can still appeal.
I think what we had talked about too, and you can read that, but when we do the next version of this bill, I think for getting it through as a standalone, when other people are reading it, if you could add the rest of the people
Oh,
in and
okay.
cross that out, that might help those who are following along and when we get to the floor, because someone might ask that.
And or we could just have it in our back pocket.
Yeah,
But I
that,
think
that's gonna be the
front
most
pocket is-
controversial thing here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of them.
Well, and we need data actually as to how many of these appeals of 10 persons or more are slowing up what project. I mean, we
The
need
NRC
some more
was
data.
supposed to get us
Well,
that.
there's the Berlin Mall,
Oh, there are a lot of, every one of our,
the grocery
but the
store.
question is who can still appeal? And it's abutters, it is
Joiners of butters.
Abutting
Hold on,
towns,
I'll
I
read
remember
it.
that. So if there's gonna
So-
be a traffic impact on abutting towns,
Yeah,
they get to appeal.
so Ellen has it.
So
It's a
the
pretty
rest
long
of the
list.
list of interested person is, sorry, a person owning title to property or municipality or a solid waste management district affected by a bylaw. So any of those people who are affected by a bylaw that's been adopted and who allege that the bylaw imposes unreasonable or inappropriate restrictions. The municipality that has a plan or bylaw at issue and an appeal brought under the chapter, or any municipality that adjoins that municipality. A person owning or occupying property in the immediate neighborhood of the property that's subject, so that's the immediate abutter.
Is that just limited to the abutter?
I wouldn't off the top of my head say that was a butter.
In the immediate neighborhood of the property that is subject to the decision or act taken.
In
I didn't know
immediate,
we defined neighborhood.
Who can demonstrate a physical or
Yes.
environmental impact on a
Oh, okay,
person's
yes.
interest on the criteria?
That I
reviewed?
feel, you know,
Yeah,
I would go back to the
okay.
NRC and say that feels
Yes.
relevant, that, you know, that's
Yes,
pretty,
'cause-
that's a pretty good.
our most articulate objector here is
Yeah.
Vermont Natural Resources Council,
Right.
which is an important
And then any
And thoughtful
department or an administrative subdivision of the state owning property or any interest in property within the municipality listed and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
So yeah, I think just listing the rest of the people who can still appeal would help. Okay. Assuage any concerns.
So this is really limiting the ability of a group
Of any 10 voters or property owners.
or any, right, but that's a group,
They have to come together in a combination, yes,
right,
but
right, it's not
like, oh, you mean like an interest group or some kind of
yes.
Yeah.
I think,
So it's-
affiliated
it's-
community?
They have to be 10 people who are a combination of voters or property owners within the municipality.
right, they don't have to be abutters, they could just be
Right.
anybody
They
in
could
the
go
municipality.
Right.
literally 10 miles away.
They could be somebody with a grudge against it or,
Yes.
yeah.
And they can find
Right.
9 other voters or neighbors.
Don't
Yep.
want to cut down any trees.
Yeah. Okay.
Bless you. Oh,
So the next section is section 7. It starts on page 9. So section 7 and 8 go together. This relates to the approval of subdivision plats. So, you did hear some testimony on this, so we should maybe discuss it. So
Yeah.
this new language is before a plat for a major subdivision is approved, a public hearing on the plat shall be held by the appropriate municipal panel. A bylaw may provide for the administrative officer to approve minor subdivisions. So this is doing two things. It's telling towns that they are allowed to give their administrative officer the ability to approve minor subdivisions and only requiring a public hearing for a major subdivision.
And we define major and minor somewhere, because I thought
No,
one of our
no,
witnesses had
no.
suggested we strike minor and major.
Yeah, Catherine Dimitri.
Because they're not defined. I believe.
So they're not defined, and so I think Catherine also made the point that, technically, some towns are already doing this. Some towns have already defined it for themselves, because they do have some wide latitude to empower their administrative officers to do certain things. So I think that was already sort of there. This is just making it very clear. But the first part on line 11 is whether or not, so currently under the statute, a hearing is required for any subdivision. So whether or not you want to require that.
Make it major, you mean?
Yeah, if you want to limit it to major, if you want to define that, or if you want to make a change there.
And if I rifle around and find Catherine's suggestions, would that make sense? I mean, I think, if anyone recall, I think she was just saying, since they're undefined,
Well,
there's discretion, but there's also towns that have made their own rules about when a public hearing is
What's a
required.
minor
Yeah,
subdivision in South Burlington
right.
would be a major in a small town with 100 residents. 5 more houses is a lot bigger if you've got
Right.
100 houses than if you've got 100,000. And it's the size of the community determines the impact. 5 houses, you wouldn't even notice in Chittenden County. 5 houses up in the
Charlotte.
Kingdom, maybe in Charlotte. Up in the Kingdom, 5 houses put into almost any town would be a major development.
Right.
So it
So could
really
we,
need to let them decide.
right, so could we let towns decide and
Yeah.
just put language in here to say, minor subdivisions with, the municipality having the authority to define
Yeah,
minor
as
and
defined
major?
by the municipality.
Sure, you could,
or we could just simply define major.
Right, but I
Is
think,
that what Catherine said?
So what Catherine says is, keep the proposed language, but delete major and minor. These are not defined by statute, which we couldn't define. Administrative officers already have the ability to approve subdivisions of any size if the bylaws allow. Allowing the administrative officer to approve the plat would allow the administrative officer to grant approval through the whole process.
So I think this will just incent people to take up the bylaw modernization piece so they can define it for themselves. But I tend to agree with Catherine that we're not going to be good at defining major and minor for the entire state. And if we say it, then it complicates things more than if we if we just clarify they have the administrative authority and they should work it out in their bylaws, what a major and minor is.
but, so we don't want to use the words major and minor.
Right.
Just strike those words.
so I guess
That's what.
so then my question is,
Mm-hmm.
are you making a change at all? So
Mm.
are you giving towns an ability, so the first part is, do you want there to be a public hearing required for every subdivision?
So maybe that could be a may. Would that be the appropriate change there, is if that's a may? And then
Yes.
somewhere else you're saying they can define when a public hearing is needed in their bylaws.
Right.
Yes, you could do that.
Oh, those names and shells are. I know, where we put the commas important.
Because that does leave discretion to the administrative officer,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yes.
sounds good. Mhm.
Well, so the public hearing may be held by the panel. The town shall define in which circumstances they will need to have a.
In their
hearing.
bylaws.
Yeah,
So then the change will just be the shall to the may.
and adding that sentence.
Because it already kind of says if the bylaws provide, but however we define that.
Yeah.
And then you just harmonize that with section 8.
Yes. Well, because, yeah.
So what would you take this sentence of bylaw may provide for the administrative office to approve certain subdivisions
Subdivisions not.
or just
Yes.
subdivisions?
Well, we could take out the word minor and say, a bylaw may provide for when the administrative officer shall approve subdivisions, or which
Or it could be-
circumstances.
Under which
Mhm.
circumstances they.
Bylaw may establish circumstances for administrative officer review or something like that.
Yeah, I think I think
Something.
a little
Yeah,
simpler
I
would be
think
better.
Alan's got enough to work with.
Yeah. Ellen, do we need to change on 19 to get rid of minor?
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
The harmonizing.
And
Yes.
are there any other shalls or mays here, or do we want to keep all that? The time period? I think we want to keep all that.
I'll have to go through. I don't think anything else needs to be changed, but on page 11, there's another reference to minor. So,
Minor's fine if you give the town the ability to define what is major and minor in their town.
And this is all subdivision bylaws may include, and you could just say provisions to allow the administrative officer to approve subdivisions without a public hearing or something.
It's just gonna.
Okay. So the next section, section 9, is on page 12. So this language is, I think primarily a clarification of existing language. So I'll read it to you. So on page 12, so this has to do with appeals to the environmental court. So after a permit decision has been made. So designated areas, notwithstanding subdivision A of this section, a determination by the appropriate municipal panel that a residential development will not result in an undue adverse effect on the character of the area affected shall not be subject to appeal if the proposed residential development seeking conditional use approval under 4414 is within the designated downtown growth center neighborhood development area. Other elements of the determination made by the appropriate municipal panel may be appealed. So in the first sentence, language has just been moved around because that's what it already said, but it was difficult to read. And then the sentence was it was unclear if anything besides the character of the area could be appealed in that circumstance. So this is clarifying that other elements could be appealed, but the decision of character of the area shall not be appealed.
I know people have raised concerns. I think this is a really important section. I mean,
Yeah.
how people determine that it doesn't fit with the character of the area because
It's
de jure discrimination.
it's in the eyes. of the
Yeah,
beholder.
exactly.
Well, also, I thought we took care of this last year. Wasn't this in our bill last year?
Things were in our bill that never made it through.
This
No,
wasn't,
this
this
made
wasn't,
it through.
so no,
Character.
last year you did something different with character of the area. So there is already limitations on the ability to
Right.
appeal character of the area. This is a different issue. I think the discussion of it came up last year because the language was unclear. But you did something entirely different with character of the area last year.
Not concerning appeals.
Yes, you did something about when it can be used.
And we didn't add appeals.
So this language on page 12 has existed for a while, but their question was raised of whether or not it was clear.
And this is just clarifying.
Yeah.
So we're simply clarifying statute.
I mean, obviously, it's sort of a fine line of whether or not it's clarifying because you're adding an additional sort of piece of language, but it was hard to determine the intent. And so if you'd like to make a different choice on line 11, you can.
Yeah.
Because basically, if you, the other option is, if character of the area has been found to be not undue, then the permit can't be appealed at all. So there are multiple elements to a permit that need to be evaluated, one of them being the character of the area. So if the town finds that a project is within the character of the area, can that determination be challenged, or can any other determination be challenged? And so what this is saying is that if the town finds character of the area is met, that determination cannot be challenged, but other elements of the permit potentially could be challenged.
What does that sentence accomplish, I guess?
It's clarifying, yeah, it's anything else. could be challenged.
Character of the area is in the eyes of the beholder, and it's,
Right.
you can't say, yeah, it's a judgment call. It's not crystal clear. What I think is impacting my neighborhood character is what I think the character of my neighborhood is. Somebody else may think it's a different kind of neighbor.
Exactly.
So in the event that there is a determination by the authority that it will result in a damage to the character of the area, that can be appealed.
That can be appealed, yes. Yes.
So the notion here in this case is, one of the major arguments is that people use the process to delay unduly and to take a subjective judgment.
Right.
And apply it. It means you can automatically have someone opposed who fits the qualified character or qualified circumstance to delay and drag something out. And this eases that problem.
Limiting subjective.
Yes, yes, and so this is saying, if the town has found that this project is within the character of the area, someone else cannot challenge that. Someone else can't subjectively say, I don't think it's in the character of the area, if the town has already made that judgment.
I mean, the area, yeah, I mean, the character of the areas, this is what my neighborhood looks like. If you put a house, when I moved in, there were no houses across the street from me. There were 2 lots. Now there's houses. That changed the character of my, I can't see Camel's Hump anymore. But did it change? But I could appeal on that for a long time. And it gets too expensive to go through.
It does.
And they were nice little starter ranches then.
Are they huge McMansions now?
They haven't changed, well, the one across the street had a facade change, but they're still the same houses, and they are, but their prices aren't at starter homes anymore.
So,
Yeah.
so help me understand. The DRB or the zoning board or the planning commission can use criteria to make a decision about the appropriateness of a project in their community. And it could include character.
Yes.
And what we're limiting is the ability for other people, once that decision has been made by the town's appropriate body, what we're limiting is the people who can appeal it.
You get one shot to talk about the character.
And it's in the board.
Right.
It's in the decision phase.
Yes, right,
But the appeal cannot be made on character.
yes.
Great.
And it is narrow, this is residential development in the designated areas.
So as we have discussed already, sadly, in most towns, that designated area is pretty tiny.
But that might change with the study. I think they're trying to give a head start for housing development.
I agree.
And then look at like, can we expand this?
So I'm comfortable with this as written.
I think it sounds great. Are all these designations state designations?
Yes.
So is there something, it may be too late to do this, but is there something we want to add that would have a municipal designation?
So municipalities are, okay, I guess the question is why. So the state designation program is its own program.
Right.
Towns do have ability in their town plan to determine which, to zone, but also to identify areas that they could call a downtown without getting it designated, but that's separate. And so this is specific to programs that have been formally designated by the states.
Right, no, I understand, and the theory is that because they've been formally designated, they're a great place for housing. And that's why they deserve, that's why residential development in those areas deserves a special pass.
Well, it's also, that's where there's a nexus between local and state, where they're appealing to the, they have an appeals process to the environmental division of the
Right.
state.
I was just responding to
Yeah.
Senator Clarkson's concern that some of these are very small and trying to find a way to easily expand them. Or maybe they just need to go through the process.
Yeah, I mean, this is where like, I think we're setting the stage, I'll just, for whatever it's worth, I think we're setting the stage for, we're trying to loosen up the ability to develop in these designated areas. And that may appeal to people next year when we look at the major study of designations, et cetera, and now people may see more opportunity and more, you
Okay,
know,
more value in
more
that.
value.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. As just one more, and then if we get through section, the next section, we're almost done with Ellen, which is really good. 'cause we can
Section
learn
10.
more to believe. Okay,
12, page 12,
Yes.
section 10.
yeah.
Yes, so this is the creation of by right zoning. And so this is requiring that municipal panels who are making decisions on housing development or the housing portion of a mixed use development cannot require different standards than are what's in their bylaws already. They can't increase or decrease from they can't increase or decrease the project on these enumerated lists unless they provide justification as listed on page 13.
And Senator Harrison had some,
Right, do you want me to?
you might
I
just
don't know
want
if
to
I
tell the
can find
committee
it.
and then you're.
Yeah, so what I was suggesting on these, when I first read this, it made it seem, and I know this wasn't the intent, that the minimum lot size, for example, is increased. And I don't have the language in front of me, but I was suggesting language that would say something like require, let me get this straight.
Require a larger lot size.
Yeah, require a larger lot size than that required in the municipal bylaws. It would say, it has the same intent, but I just think it would be more clear.
Mhm.
Instead of
Okay, sure.
increasing the minimum. It seems like a
Correct,
contradiction
right.
to
Shall
increase
not
the minimum.
add a new requirement, is essentially what
Right,
you're saying.
right, and I can get I'm sorry, I wasn't
Yeah.
prepared for
No,
language,
no,
but I
yeah.
can get it.
I just wanted you to share your intent with the committee and then we. can
Right,
vote.
right, it was to just make it more clear that the panel in reviewing that development can't require that development to do either more or less than what the bylaws require.
Yes.
We're not actually changing the bylaws, that's all
Right,
I was.
right, yeah.
Well,
So I can send you that.
so this is honoring the local control, the local bylaw.
Oh, very
Saying
much
you
so.
just cannot increase what's in the local bylaw.
You can't require this particular development to do more or less than what is
Is
To be
required
larger
by
than
the law.
state is saying.
Yes, you have to abide by the law is what I took this
Right.
to mean.
It's
And I,
another way to prevent backdoor
yes,
changes.
yes,
The by right piece is saying, this isn't like a bird.
right, right. If it says the
You're-
minimum lot size is, 2,000, you can't have
Well,
a smaller.
Mhm.
I just
Well,
put
you
it
could
in
have a
terms of smaller or larger, depending on which way. I need to send you the language.
Yeah.
Can't require a
But
large.
you
I'll show
can't
you.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot, you've got duplex by right, or whatever we call it. But there is a difference between putting a couple of duplexes in a couple of acres, depending on how you divide it up, and putting all duplexes in a couple of acres, because you are doubling the density at that point, and that's different than saying, I can have one or two, but
Mhm.
there is a difference
Mhm.
in how, just in the density of people. And if you get that density and you don't have open space, like backyards that you might have if you just had a single family in there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking of a section of this city that tended to be lower income. Minorities being immigrant groups that moved through. And there was no playground on that side of the city anywhere. They finally put one in the backyard of the Catholic school, which is now the art museum, but it's a very small playground. There was no space for any of those children in that area to play, except on the frozen river, which doesn't freeze anymore. And I don't know that again, my concern is in trying to get greater density that we don't recreate the slums of York. That tend to get, people as they get more money to move out, and then you get lower income people to move in, and they don't have the money to maintain.
Right.
It,
And even this section says by right, but at the end it says, it's saying you can't wiggle your way out of all of the things we're asking you to do with this bill, but you can if, there's wetlands, setbacks, flood areas, or the identified restrictions do not, and if the identified restrictions do not result in an unequal treatment of housing or an unreasonable exclusion.
it's not unreasonable exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you are doubling the density. If you set your density for single family homes, you're expecting a couple and 1.5 kids or whatever the average is now.
Mm-hmm.
If you put duplexes in, you're expecting 4 adults and 2 3/4 children in that area. That doubles the density. But you have, if the area is such, so there's a wetlands. Well, I don't know that we want kids playing in the wetlands or an environmentally sensitive area.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
just,
don't know, wetlands are fun to play.
yes, they are.
With the right rubber boots, man.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's what the environmentalists want to have happen.
Well, depends on the play.
I have a wonderful back drainage ditch full of quicksand I can go play in. Literally. But I mean, I want us, in our zeal to
Yeah.
increase density or
Yeah.
housing, I don't want us.
One final piece of testimony we might hear next week, this
Okay.
is chair's prerogative maybe, is the group that wrote the book on missing middle. And they're called Opticos, and if you look at the document we got from AARP,
Yeah.
they wrote it with them, and Opticos Design did a lot of the pictures of like, what are we talking about,
Okay,
'Cause
but
I feel
that's
like a
what
visual
we're
we could-
talking about.
Yeah.
But an individual developer that just wants to sell a lot of homes
Mm-hmm.
may never have seen that book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the tenements were wonderful places to pack lots of people in cities.
Right.
They didn't turn out to be socially or any other way healthy at some point. And
I will say that feels like when we get to the Act 250 pieces, we're talking about large developments, 100, 200 units. And I want to make sure we continue to have this conversation here. I think we're talking about giving everyone a little piece of something nice, a nice neighborhood.
I
and
think,
a nice
yeah, and I
backyard,
think,
you know.
but if you're creating a new neighborhood,
Mhm.
you just say there's a lot in my neighborhood and it's all single family, and you can now put a duplex up there. If it looks like those duplexes, that's fine.
Mhm.
They're building things here where there's 2 houses, a garage, but they're actually connected. There's like one foundation, but they're that
Mhm.
connected. I think, that, but if you're talking a duplex and they're square brick boxes,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
something, and if you're talking about, you have an absolute right, so if I say this acre, it, can have 5 homes on it.
Mhm.
Well, now you were essentially saying that this acre can have 10 homes on it. It doubles the density.
No, it's 5 dwelling units. So it could be a duplex and a triplex.
Right, but
But not 10. That's.
if I could put 5 single-family homes
Mhm.
on an acre of land,
Yeah.
and if I have duplex by right, that means I can put 2 homes on every, so I get, rather than, 5 homes per acre, I end up with 10 homes per acre.
And maybe we can look at some images of what that ends up looking like. which
Well,
think
I mean,
South
but
Burlington's
we
doing
have
with it.
pictures.
Yeah.
That doesn't require that a builder build to our pictures. My image is what I lived in the city. It's a square brick box.
Mhm.
Right.
And then of course-
So I think that all our planners, everyone, our Better Places program, all our interest in quality of life. It will be taking that density and complementing it with green spaces that make it possible to live.
You're
in close-
assuming that every town has a planner that can do that.
But most of the towns that you're concerned about being overpopulated would have a planner. And I think that, I think this is the kind of work that we trust to our planners and that we know matter. We know green space matters to and that we have plenty of green space for people to go to in this state. And I think
That's
that,
assuming you have an automobile,
So we're getting
which we
really
aren't
good
gonna
picture.
let you park.
We have a developer next who is doing a kind of dense, but environmentally accessible project with net zero development, right in like a former industrial park in South Burlington. So I'd love to give them the opportunity to get in the witness chair.
Yeah.
Before we let, Ellen, do we have you tomorrow? No. Okay, can I flag now, because I think it's your last section is the appropriation.
No.
Of that's dated.
No, the appropriation's mine. I have a lot.
Oh,
of
you would,
sections.
and then we get to Act 250.
I was gonna say,
Oh,
we
right,
have a
never
bunch
mind.
more
There's-
without-
Then there's Act 250.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Well,
the appropriation, we definitely want
Yeah,
to flag.
I do want to flag that because that currently says, updating their bylaws, and this is where a request has come in to acknowledge that some money to update bylaws is nice, some money to also create new bylaws for towns that don't have
Exactly.
bylaws is nice.
Exactly. I think we just need to be thoughtful about that.
I was just gonna tie up this section if we're done and just say one more thing. So that we
Yes,
can finish
okay.
this section. Is I can send you the language. An example is under the minimum lot size. I was suggesting that the language say instead they may not require a larger lot size than that required by the municipal bylaws.
Right.
So that's sort of
That's
language.
clear. That's
It's
clear.
just clarity. So, and the point, as I see it, of this section is to make sure that every property owner is treated fairly.
Right,
That the
exactly.
bylaws, when they're established, need to be fairly applied.
They don't say, oh, but now you're over here in this part of town and we don't want it.
Right, right. So whatever is the law is
Exactly.
fairly applied. And so then I can send the language in for the next section.
Well,
Yes,
Iteration.
yes, I found drafting the language of this section tricky,
Yeah.
so if you
Yeah.
have some clarity, that would be great.
Okay.
yeah, so I think we're ready to work on some new language for these sections and bring it back to the committee. And we'll have you next week more often to talk about Act 250, which will take a little while too. But maybe by next week, we'll be looking at 7.1 and we'll have
Okay.
looked at some of the pieces in this section. Thanks so much, Ellen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Evan, you want to join us in the witness chair? Sorry for the delay. You've heard our
Thanks for having me.
thinking here.
I do have a 7 slide deck.
I think if you join our Zoom or you email Scott, whichever is.
It might be easier for you to control and.
Yeah,
talk
why don't I
as you
just
do it.
join the Zoom? Can someone send me the link? It's evan@o'brienbrothersdt.com.
while he's doing that? you want
I'm
to-
getting the look if you.
Okay,
Right.
we're gonna keep going.
There's a slide there. hopefully.
Yeah, so if you just want to introduce yourself for the record while he's getting you that link. Yeah.
Great, my name is Evan Langfeld. I'm the president and CEO of O'Brien Brothers. It's a 65-year-old real estate development company in South Burlington. So, let's see here.
While they're doing that, Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself quickly for when you get in the witness chair?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Shu. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Futures Project. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, and we have you just for a short time on housing and its relation to Vermont's future. But then we'd love to have you come back when we get to workforce as well.
I'll be back.
They're related, yeah.
Just pulling up here.
I haven't met you. I'm Wendy Harrison from the Wyndham District, and I work with Jeff Lewis a little bit,
Oh, great.
and he was the,
And Jen.
and Jen, yes.
Have others met Kevin? Does that help? Do you want to introduce
Yes, I'm Ann Cummings. I'm from Washington District, right here.
Senator Clarkson from Windsor County, Senator Robinson from Chittenden County?
And Randy Brock from Franklin and part of Grand Isle County.
Nice to meet you.
Full disclosure, I'm vice chair of the Vermont Teachers Project.
Oh, I
So work
didn't
very
realize.
closely with Kevin.
There you go.
Is he just pulling up? It's Vermont, everybody's connected.
It is. Okay, so it's coming over there.
I think it should be. Yeah, now it's. This is the one day I got my eye on.
There you go.
All right. So I thought what I'd do is just try and give you sort of a high level perspective from our perspective as a developer, kind of what is contributing to the rising cost of housing and the lack of inventory. So as I said, I'm Evan Langfeld. I'm the president and CEO of O'Brien Brothers, 65-year-old real estate development and management company in South Burlington. The image you're looking at is actually one of the streets, it's a 115 unit phase in South Burlington on the O'Brien family property, abutted by Kennedy and Kimball to the north. So what the slide you're looking at right now is kind of a snapshot of what's taken place over the last 3 years. The graph on the left-hand side is showing the different units. You don't have to pay attention to the names of them, but what it's showing is the percent increase that we've experienced on direct costs. So these are hard costs. Our hard costs, which are direct costs, also include labor, but not our management of the project. So you can see the individual year-over-year increases. So over a 3-year period from January of 20 to January of 23, we've had a 50% increase on direct costs. So that's dollar for dollar. And what happens is obviously that cost gets transferred to the buyer at some point.
And all on the bottom, those are all your project names.
Those are the individual unit names.
The unit
So
names.
each of those is representative of an individual unit cost increase. So on average, again, it's 50%, 50.2%. It really equates on a dollar basis to $120,000 of additional cost per unit, and again, in direct costs. There's a lot of contributing factors to that. On the right-hand side, it's showing some of our trade laborers roofing one of our townhouse units. Obviously, we're an old state. I think we're either the oldest or the second oldest, depending on which study you read. And our construction workers are, I believe, the oldest in the country as well. I think our average construction worker is about 45, which is about 3 years older than the average across the country. And as I think we all are aware, construction ages the average worker a lot faster than sitting behind a desk, unfortunately. And so while the problem is, it's critical and it's acute right now, it's going to be even worse in 10 years unless we start, building that workforce. But part of building that workforce is providing housing. What I tried to do here was encapsulate some of the soft costs that go into this. And this doesn't account for architecture, engineering, anything. I realize that some of this is probably a little bit hard to read. The left-hand column is showing what a breakdown of city permitting fees on the top, and then on the bottom, the state fees. And what we've done is try to give sort of a snapshot. There's some assumptions being made on the size of the houses because the size of our houses vary. And some of the permit fees are tied to square footage and cost of homes. But I think this gives a pretty good snapshot of what each individual unit incurs, which this equates to $25,000 per unit in fees. And again, that's not engineering, that's not architecture, that's not legal, that's not the duration of the project and all the costs that go into that. That's just straight up fees. And that includes, things like sketch plan fee, preliminary plat fee, zoning permit fees, but it also includes a whole host of impact fees, transportation impacts, recreation impacts, conservation impacts.
We
And
had
so,
the city of South Burlington yesterday tell us that it tops out at about $15,000 per unit if it's 4 bedrooms.
exactly. So that's a new education impact fee that has just been levied and will impact our new housing units. So it doesn't apply to existing housing units. I have my thoughts on that. My perspective is public education is a public right, and I don't think it should be a narrowly focused tax on new people. And it's also disproportionately targeted towards families because it's a progressive fee that the more bedrooms, the higher the cost.
Yeah.
So really, you're disproportionately targeting families, which has a counterproductive end goal to what we're trying to do as a state, which is replenish our workforce and provide families with housing.
Yeah, I'm struggling with
Yeah, it's a tough one. The right hand is really, it's specific to our project, which is just showing, what it took to get this next phase of housing across the finish line. And it's 38 months, it's ongoing. So it took 36 months from the time we submitted preliminary plat to the time we received, from the time we submitted sketch plan to the time we received final plat by the city of South Burlington. We've submitted Act 250 in September of 22. And part of the reason why we don't do them simultaneous is so much gets worked out through the city process that you don't want to have to go back and correct it after the fact. So we submitted again in September of 22. Act 250 is still pending, but we expect it to issue in March, and it looks like it's smooth sailing. But that's an indication of how long these projects take from gestation to actually getting a shovel in the ground.
And in the meantime, your cost of materials.
Cost has skyrocketed, like if you go back to that original slide. And, obviously we're in a different economic cycle than when we originally started permitting this project. So there's real implications on that front. But the bigger implication is we're just not gonna be able to get housing to the market fast enough. And, this isn't just us, this is everybody.
And how large of a development is that? How many homes?
So this is a large development. So the first phase is 115 single family and townhomes. The second phase is another 155 single family and townhomes. I'll get into a little bit of detail on that in a minute. There's also a variety of subdivided mixed use lots that are part of this. And I can show you a rendering of that at the end. So this slide is, it's not misleading, but because I think it does play a role into this issue, which is we have seen consistent in-migration into the state over the last 5-10 years, and it really ramped up over the last 3 years. I look at that as being very much a positive because a lot of the folks that have in-migrated are in their prime workforce years. Again, they're bringing kids in or they're going to have kids, and I think they're really going to contribute to the state. The challenge with it is if we don't backfill the housing inventory, we end up with a net neutral result because the people that are here move out. And I would actually say it's worse than net neutral because we're actually losing the folks. For one, they're existing Vermonters. We want to be able to take care of them. But two, a lot of the folks that we're going to end up losing that are getting priced out are the folks that build your houses. They're the plumbers, the electricians, carpenters, the school teachers, all the people that keep our communities such a great place to live. And so I don't want to focus too much on the fact that immigration is impacting this, but it is an impact. And the bottom line there, again, bringing it back to our project, that of the 106 homes that have closed to date, so are occupied on our site, in between 2018 and 2019, 12% were out-of-staters. That's gone up to 42% between 2020 and 2023. So, it is going up, and I think it's going to continue to go up based on what's going on around the country. So we have climate refugees. So
Okay, I'm just gonna ask, are they occupying the homes?
100% off. Well, I take that back. Of the 106, I think we have 5 rental properties.
Okay,
So they're primary
You
residents.
meant like second homeowner?
yeah, we heard from Virgins that in their new, more expensive one, nobody had ever lived in.
We
They
have-
bought it, but
There-
there's no one.
So I guess the
there.
question is, out of the 42% of building homes for out of staters, are they actually coming full-time? What percent are seasonal, what percent are full-time?
0% are seasonal, 100% are full-time.
Oh, good.
It's a
They're next to Beta and on Logic.
Yeah, yeah.
Places that are
the homes that we're
attracting.
building,
Yeah.
you know, people can debate what constitutes an affordable home these days, but these homes are designed and constructed essentially for our workforce. You know, they range, when we started off, we had homes that we were listing at 335 for the townhomes. They go up, you know, we've had homes that have closed around 8, but those are kind of on the very bookends. The vast majority is in the middle. The average home that we closed over the duration of the project is 513,000, just to give you kind of.
Which is now around the average cost of a house in
That's
Chittenden County.
unbelievable.
And that's about it. You know, average square footage of our homes are right around 2,100 square feet.
So it's not big.
No, we're not building for square footage. And I'll get into a little bit of what the direction for the rest of the project.
But that is as affordable as it comes.
That's,
New house in
yes,
Chittenden
in
County.
Chittenden County, that's about as good as it
Yeah.
gets.
Are you primarily based in Chittenden?
Yeah, we're 100%.
They're in
based.
South.
Yeah, so we're in South Burlington. We have properties in Burlington, we have properties in Williston, and then we have land in Colchester and Shelburne as well. Which we intend to be moving forward on housing projects in the near future. So I put this slide up, I just added actually right before I walked in, because I think it really is the underlying issue, which is we're just not building enough housing. And this is national, but I think it's even worse here in Vermont. We're not even getting close to what the demand is. We're not even getting close to a balanced market. So I think, you know, that's an accurate slide, but this one is actually the root of the problem.
And we've been underbuilding since the 80s.
We've been underbuilding since the 80s.
So, I mean, we're just caught up to this.
Right, right. And I think it got even worse after 2008. You know, people, banks stopped lending as much on speculative development, and I think that has become a problem. And again, we have an aging workforce. Trade labor is a real challenge. We have great tradesmen and women in the state, but unfortunately, there's just not a lot of them.
Well, they're getting filling
We
up
are
those
gonna get
programs.
behind some.
Yeah, no, I'm just, there's some encouraging news.
Uh,
Just so it's not all.
No, I agree. Yeah, the Vermont workforce pipeline is doing great stuff. So again, I'm moving kind of quickly on the next phase of our project. So again, the one that we're just coming to the conclusion of permitting. So it's another 155 units. We've made a decision as a company to go 100% electric on it. So it's 100% carbon free, 100% fossil fuel free. We're creating the state's first and one of the country's first microgrid communities. We've been working with Green Mountain Power to create this situation. And so all of the homes are going to be built to the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy's net zero ready standard. All of them will include 2 Tesla Powerwalls. So you have in-unit backup battery storage, which makes the home more redundant or more resilient, but it also creates more resiliency for the broader grid. And then we're also working with GMP. They're going to be constructing community scale on-site battery storage facilities. So outside of your home in a field, there's going to be this larger scale battery storage facility, which again creates redundancy and resiliency for the homes. So you will never lose your power. And you know, the storms that we're getting, I mean, you should talk to GMP about the last month and a half, what they've experienced. The linesmen are out in the field doing some pretty crazy work right now. But again, as a homeowner, you'll never lose power. You're contributing to the grid through resiliency by storing power at off-peak hours. And we're also putting solar on all the rooftops.
But you aren't burying your lines.
This is actually a bad graphic. 100% of the lines are buried.
Okay, great. That's my question, because that's the key.
So this image
We
was
just have
actually
a couple
provided to me
minutes
by
left,
GMP.
just so we
Yeah,
can get
okay.
some time.
So anyway, that's, we think it's pretty exciting. We actually haven't released it publicly yet, although this is live streaming, so
Yeah.
it's somewhat public at this point.
We're gonna
But
premiere.
I think the reality is, in order to move more of those types of projects forward, we need to start incentivizing, because otherwise, to meet our climate goals by 2030, we're never going to get there. It's just straight up mandates and straight up cost adds. So we need to start prioritizing those environmental goals, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We're doing this as a developer because we think it's the right direction. We think for homeowners, it's the right direction too, that your home is going to be worth more down the road, because you're not going to be a dinosaur dealing with fossil fuels and having your power go out. So the solutions, it's an all of the above strategy. I provided Senator Ron Hinsdale a whole a la carte menu of opportunities to take a look at. I think increased density is probably number one on my list. We need the ADUs. That's the lowest hanging fruit you can go after. By right density upgrades, again, if you're on city water and sewer, we need to maximize those investments, much of which have actually been funded by the states or by the state of Vermont. So while I agree that municipalities should have some local control, I also think that the state or the cities actually gave up a little bit of that by taking that state money and everybody's paying for it. We need to all be part of the solution. Maximize existing infrastructure investments, again, water, sewer. If you have interstate exits, if you have fiber, that's where we want to be developing. That's how you maximize our investments. And that's how you get good density and you discourage sprawl out in the middle of a cornfield in the middle of nowhere. We need to streamline the permitting process. Act 250 layered on top of a 3-year city permitting process. It's unnecessary. South Burlington has a very professional planning and zoning department. They're the second biggest municipality in the state. I don't mean to pick on them. They are perfectly capable, and believe me, they beat us up pretty good. You don't have to worry about the fact that it was a public process. 3 years of hearings. We need to incentivize adoption of climate resiliency technology and building techniques in order to have more types of projects like we're talking about that are actually going to move the needle on our climate goals. And I think we also need to recognize that Vermont demographics have changed. We're not having as big a family, so smaller units is fine. And we're not all going to live in, an 1800s farmhouse on 5 or 10 acres. And actually, a lot of folks don't want to live in that. They want low maintenance. They want to live near downtown. They're fine with shared green space, shared amenities. And that's just, it's a shift in mentality from where it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think we need to recognize that. And then the last thing I would ask is courage in the face of NIMBYism. Every single municipality is going to come to you with some exemption, some exception as to why they shouldn't qualify for the bill that you're working on. Some are legit, some are probably less legit, but everybody's going to have one. And in order to move the needle, we need to have courage to start moving. We have to move things forward because we are in crisis mode.
Thank you, Evan. I feel like we should give Kevin some time and then people can speak maybe informally at the break because we do need a break. Yeah.
I can stick around too.
If
So.
you could.
Oh,
yeah.
great. If you could stick.
I think Kevin's is very complimentary presentation and then we'll get out 5 or 15 minutes later and have a 10 or 5-minute break and then we have work to do. So.
Sure. So I'll stop the share.
Thank you very much. And those slides you've sent to,
I will.
if you send those
Yep, I
to
can send
Scott,
right
it's
now.
the only way some of us
Sure.
can leave the room is knowing you've got your stuff.
But thanks for sticking around because I think people do want to engage.
I'm trying to join the Zoom meeting right now.
Okay. And we've already done introductions. This is Kevin Chu from Vermont Future Project.
Hi, Kevin. I'm Allison. If you already did introduction.
Me too.
Connecting.
Sorry. Once you're out.
Our breaks are so secret.
It's like, really? Let's see. Anyway, so there.
Okay.
It's hard.
I'm thinking about it. It's gonna be sad for-
Okay. So, introduce me.
Oops, you need to mute yourself.
Great.
Muted.
Now we can figure out why we're all looking here when he's up on the screen.
Is there still a feedback?
How's that?
No, that's good. You just have
Okay.
to turn it up. Yeah. He's a techno whiz. He knows these things.
Thank you for having me again. My name is Kevin Chu, Executive Director of the Vermont Futures Project. Since this is my first time meeting many of you, I'll share a little bit more about who I am. So another hat I wear, I'm the son of immigrant parents. My parents moved to Vermont, of all places, back in 1986. And I, through my work, try to honor that brave decision they made to leave China and come to the United States in pursuit of economic opportunity. The American dream. And I'm so thankful that they made that decision too. I like to say I grew up here in Vermont and I look forward to growing old here too. I really mean that. So as a Vermont Futures Project, we do research and education in pursuit of this mission question that we try to answer, which is how can we use data to support the evolution of Vermont's economy towards a thriving future full of opportunity for all. So embedded in that mission question are these guiding principles of the economy, the environment, and equity. And in the middle, there is a future where Vermont is thriving for all people, right? And we, through our work and through data, try to dispel the zero-sum myth that's so prevalent in public discourse, which is using one perspective in opposition to others, the environment versus the economy, or the economy versus equity. But if we take a holistic approach and use all these perspectives together, then we can move beyond the zero-sum myth. And it brings people together for productive discourse aligned towards common goals and values. So I'll start off with the economic perspective, and I'll try to keep it really simple. Vermont needs more people, and more people need Vermont. What do I mean by
Everybody
that?
needs to hear this.
That's great.
We can make bumper stickers if you'd like. Workforce shortage. So what if every unemployed person in Vermont found a job? There are about 23,000 open jobs in Vermont, and an unemployment rate that's been at historic low levels in the mid 2%, so about 2.6% was the latest number published. So that's about 8,000 job seekers. So if you just do a simple subtraction there, 23,000 open jobs minus 8,000 job seekers, there's still 15,000 remaining jobs open. So we need more people. Prior to the pandemic, for the 2 decades leading up to the pandemic, there was never a month in which Vermont had more than 20,000 jobs open.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years, we've been above 20,000 open jobs every single month.
Wow.
Is there like a healthy number of open jobs?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I can do some research on that follow-up.
So what was our average again
For which number?
for the average number of jobs in that bump of that
Yeah,
graph?
so, prior to COVID, the 2 decades prior, we never had a month where there were more than 20,000 open jobs. And in the last 2 years, we've been over 20,000 in every single month.
But can I just follow that?
Is it like what's the but? Like
No, the but is we have only, some people would say, oh, but 20, the difference between 20 and 23 isn't that much. The difference is not the number of jobs that are open, but the difference is the number of people looking for those jobs. So
For every month.
So we need more people. And to really emphasize that point, here's the age distribution of Vermont's population. I put a vertical red line there to indicate average retirement age, and then the other line, the horizontal one, shows that time only works in one direction. So those
sadly,
peaks at the sort of 55 to 64 age bands, we see that there are a lot of Vermonters that are nearing retirement age. And I'd like to convert those percentages to absolute numbers for you. The 7.8% represents about 50,000 Vermonters that are in the 60 to 64 age band. So if we fast forward 10 years, that's about 100,000 Vermonters that are currently in the workforce that'll be reaching retirement age. 100,000 Vermonters over 10 years reaching retirement age. So we need more people.
yeah,
That's the economic perspective.
this supports.
I'll shift over to an environmental lens. So this is a screenshot from the Energy Action Network's annual report. Vermont passed the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2020 and has put together a climate action plan, right? And the goal is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over time. And we see that the 2 largest contributors are transportation and thermal, so heating and cooling. And this is why housing matters so much, right? Transportation, the amount of travel that people need to do is related to where they live and where they need to get to. And then the home heating and cooling, Vermont's housing stock is very old and continues aging rapidly. Many of our homes were built before 1940.
25%.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when we think about the Global Warming Solutions Act, right, we're talking about a global issue. It's important to also take a global perspective. The scale matters, right? Vermont's a pretty small state in terms of our population. The global population is 8 billion. We're at about 645,000. So when we talk about creating solutions here, such as the exciting projects that Evan's team is working on, we also need to think about trying to invite more people to participate in those solutions so then we can scale up our impact over time. right? There's a really easy way to make this graph go to 0, which is get rid of people. But that would not be a thriving future for Vermont. So as
You'd
we
be surprised the testimony.
as we create solutions to scale up our impact towards global climate solutions, we need to invite more people to participate in those solutions. I found some language in the climate action plan that says Vermont will need to prioritize the people who will be most affected by climate change. And I do want to acknowledge that there will be differential impact on Vermonters, but the people that are going to be impacted most by climate change actually don't live here in Vermont, right? If we think about wildfires and coastal flooding and the natural disasters that'll happen around the globe due to the impacts of climate change, those will be the people that are impacted most. And I would love for Vermont to be a viable option for people to relocate to, regardless of where they land on the socioeconomic spectrum. So that's the environmental perspective. Vermont needs more people, and more people need Vermont. So let's move now to the equity perspective. Here's the racial and ethnic composition of our state versus our country. And this shows change over the last 2 decades. So Vermont's made some progress that should be celebrated, right? And we see our donut there looks a little bit different than the United States donut. So in 2021, we had about 92% white population, which means about 8% BIPOC. And again, if we convert those percentages to absolute numbers, that would be about 50 to 60,000 BIPOC Vermonters. Now, if we were to double the number of BIPOC Vermonters, that would get us to about 700,000 people. I think our state has the capacity for 700,000 people for sure, probably quite a bit more. But if we did that, we doubled the number of BIPOC Vermonters, we would still be at 85% white. So still pretty far off of the US average. So from an equity perspective, if we really want our population to be more representative of the world around us, so then we are creating more and well-informed decisions with different voices at the table, we need to add more people, right? I'd rather change these ratios through addition and not subtraction. Subtraction doesn't help our workforce issue.
Well, there's natural subtraction.
So I've been saying we need more people. And then if we look at Vermont's population data, we have seen an increase in population. So over the last decade, it was sort of estimated that population was stagnating for a bit, but the 2020 census revealed that Vermont's population went up a little bit, about 17,000. Not that much.
That's huge.
It's huge for Vermont.
Hey, it beats
there's a
626.
lot more room to grow. And one of the questions is this increase going to be permanent? Was it sort of a temporary spike due to COVID? How will this play out long term? But what we did find out during this spike was that it had an impact on the housing market, right? Demand for Vermont still remains high. I put a vertical line there to indicate the start of the pandemic, and you see that the volumes of sales in the Vermont housing market are still elevated compared to pre-pandemic levels. So there's strong demand, and this is data for property sales to buyers reporting out-of-state addresses. The effect on prices when there's high demand and low supply, again, that vertical line shows about when the pandemic started, and we see those average prices start to tick up. And to some of the points made earlier, we have made deliberate decisions over the past few decades that have led us to this moment that we keep calling a housing crisis, but I'm not sure if that's even the right word, because a crisis to me seems like an acute event that causes disarray, whereas this has been decades in the making. But if we do want to call it a crisis, the response to crises requires urgency, right? And this situation that we're in terms of housing took decades to make. I hope that the solutions for us to get out of it don't take decades to implement. So if we're truly calling it a crisis, we also need to act with urgency. I think this is at the root of a lot of the issues. And again, bringing together all the perspectives, economic, environmental, and equity perspectives. The Vermont Futures Project sponsored a question in the Vermonter poll, which is run through the University of Vermont. They take survey responses from a representative sample of Vermonters. And last year we asked if Vermonters are supportive of growing Vermont's population size to strengthen its workforce. 49% of Vermonters said yes, 38% said no, and 13% were unsure. Right. So to me, there's also some hope here because we're pretty close to that 50% mark in terms of saying yes. How do we use data to bring people into discussion to sway those unsure people into the yes category? I think the housing data shows it's been too easy to say no for too long.
Well, we can't have big conversations.
More complicated than that.
So, do we need more people? If you want more housing, we definitely need more people to build it. If you want more childcare openings, we need people to work there. If you want to address solutions, or if you want solutions to address climate change, we need more people to create and participate in those solutions. And if you want a more just and equitable, inclusive Vermont, then we definitely need more people. So if we need more people, then we need to build more houses. Vermont needs more people need Vermont.
Thank you, Kevin.
Like your takeaway.
It
That's-
sounds so simple.
I wrote to Megan and I said, I think you need to come with me to Senate Natural Resources when I present this bill there. But thank you for your work. I mentioned to Kevin, I think most people were here, but I hope we have you back because you are doing great work and it's going to inform a lot of our work in economic development and housing. I've been using a lot of your talking points already, which might be familiar to folks in the Senate. So thank you. I want to give us about a 10-minute break. And so if you can stay and informally talk to the committee. that'd be great.
Thank you for having me.
This was great. Thank you.
This so supports our relocated worker, Randy, and our encouraging people